Hi kids, it's me again. Thank you for all of your questions. I'm looking forward to answering them. I've got 7 of them today, so I'll be answering these questions, and I'll even do some clever editing on this video so I can maybe put some pictures around and about so you can see what I'm talking about when I answer. The problem is when I answer questions I do go into lots of detail, so I'll try and keep it easy for you to understand, but I will use some pictures as well to make it easy. So the first question I'm going to answer today is the question, why do rockets go to space? Well, there's 2 main reasons rockets go to space. The first reason is satellites. A satellite is a piece of equipment that's built here on Earth and then put into space, and it orbits around the planet. It flies around the planet many times a day. And these satellites can do all sorts of jobs, and they can do things like help us to predict the weather, so they can take pictures of the clouds, and they take lots of pictures so they can see how the clouds are moving across the surface of the Earth, and we can then use them to predict weather and tell people what weather they're going to have. We can use them for communication, so if you phone someone, you use a satellite and it bounces the signal around the Earth nice and fast so you can talk to people all over the world. And now we also use that for internet as well. So if you go on the internet on the computer or use video chat, like Zoom chat, you can use satellites so you can get these pictures all around the Earth. But the other reason we send rockets into space is to send people into space. And over 50 years ago, we sent people to walk on the moon. And the first mission to the moon was called Apollo 11. And these 3 men are the men of the mission Apollo 11. And Neil Armstrong was the first man to walk on the moon on July the 20th, 1969, over 52 years ago. So these 3 men went into space using a rocket. So there's lots of reasons why we send people into space. So that leads me very nicely on to my second question. What is the moon made of? Well, before we ever went to the moon, we'd still seen it with our eyes and taken pictures of it with cameras and looked at it through telescopes. And just by doing that, we could tell that the moon was made of rock. But what scientists wanted to know is what kind of rock the moon was made of. So when they sent astronauts to the moon, they had them pick up pieces of rock from the surface and bring them back to the Earth. And here on Earth, the scientists could study the types of rock to see if it's the same as the kind of rock we have here on Earth or if it's completely different rock. And what they found is that some of the bits of rock were different to anything that had ever been found on the Earth before. So they thought the moon maybe came from somewhere else. But then, years later, they found those same rocks on the Earth. So now scientists think that the moon is actually part of the Earth. And a very long time ago, billions of years ago, the Earth was struck by a big meteorite or maybe another planet. Something crashed into the Earth and it sent lots of bits of debris, bits of rock and rubble into space. And those bits of rock all came together and they formed into the moon. And that's where the moon came from. So the moon is made of rock, and it's actually made of rock that came from the planet Earth. So the next question, why are there rings around planets? And there are. So if you look at the solar system where we live, all of these objects orbiting around the sun, you'll see that we've got 8 planets. And the 4 smaller planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth and Mars, are very small and close to the sun, and they don't have rings around them. But the bigger planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus and Neptune, well, you can see from a distance that Saturn has got a big ring around it, but actually all the big planets have got rings. And do you remember, what did I tell you the moon was made of? The moon was made of rock. Well, actually these rings are made of the same thing. These rings are made of rock and dust and ice, and they're spinning around in orbit around the planets. Saturn has the biggest ring because scientists think that one of Saturn's moons, because Saturn has got 82 moons. 82 moons. And they think it used to have at least one more moon. And they think that moon got so close to the surface of the planet that the planet's gravity ripped that moon to pieces. And those pieces of the moon started to spin around the planet, to orbit around and around. And they formed into this flat disk that flies around Saturn. So Saturn's ring is made out of pieces of ice and rock and dust, the pieces that are left over from that moon. And all the big planets have rings, so they're all made of these little bits of ice and rock and dust. It's just that Saturn has this huge, beautiful ring that we get to see if we look at it from pictures or from a telescope. Oh, my next question. This is a good one. Why do I like planets? Well, there's no quick answer to this. I love planets because they're so different and so amazing and so beautiful. If you look at just the planets in our own solar system, they're all so different and so interesting. You've got really little ones and really big ones and beautiful ones, and they're all different colours. I love the Earth because it's the most unique planet, the most unusual and beautiful planet we've ever found, with all of its colours on the surface and life on the surface. It's the only planet that we know of that has life on it. And then Jupiter is huge and beautiful, and it's made of gas, and these clouds of gas swirl around and they cause storms on the surface, like the great big red spot that you see on Jupiter. Neptune, I love Neptune because it's blue. Blue is my favourite colour, and I love the colour of Neptune. I think it's an incredible planet. And those are just the planets in our solar system. In the entire universe, there are loads of planets. We've found nearly 5,000 planets out there in space so far, but that's not many really, because in the whole universe, there's millions, billions, even trillions of planets out there. And just think, if the 8 planets that we've got in our solar system are that amazing, just think what else could be out there in the universe waiting for us to discover. So I'm always excited to learn about these new things that we find out about planets when we find a new one outside of our solar system. Next, what is your favourite planet? Oh, this is a hard question. I think it has to come down to 2, and even then I struggle. For years, my favourite planet has been Saturn, because Saturn is just so beautiful because of those rings. I love the rings around Saturn. I think they're incredible. There's not just one ring, there's about 7 rings actually. If you look closely, you can see the individual rings and there's gaps between them. So I've always loved Saturn. But then there's the Earth as well, and the Earth is a beautiful planet with the green of the land and the blue of the seas and the white of the ice at the North Pole and the South Pole and the white of the clouds in the sky, and the atmosphere and the life on the surface. And I think I might have to actually go with Earth over Saturn. I do think Saturn's beautiful, but the Earth, it's got us on it, and all the people of the world and the animals and the plants and the trees. It's a magnificent planet, and it's the only planet of its kind that we've found in the universe so far. So the Earth, I think, is my absolute favourite planet. Next question. Why are there shooting stars? Ooh, this is a bit of a tricky one, and it's one where you get to do a bit of an experiment with me. So first of all, can you remember what the moon was made out of? Yeah. The moon was made out of rock. So the planets and the moons all formed a very long time ago, over 4 billion years ago. And they all came together by little pieces of rock in space, floating together and sort of sticking together like that. And as they got bigger, into bigger pieces of rock, as they got more bits coming towards them, they got into bigger and bigger objects, until they formed into the planets and the moons that you find in our solar system. But there's still some little bits of rock out there, and these are known as asteroids or meteors. And these little bits of rock fly through space very fast. And there's nothing in space to stop a rock slowing down. Think about the Earth. If you go outside and throw a ball as high and as far and as fast as you can, what will happen to that ball? It will eventually come back down to the Earth. It will slow down, hit the ground, and it will stop on the ground. But in space, if you were able to throw a rock, it would just keep going at the same speed in a line forever. Because there's no air in space, and air will slow down your ball. If you throw the ball through the air, the ball will slow down and hit the ground. And gravity will pull the ball down as well to the ground. But in space, a piece of rock will keep flying forever, unless it hits something like a planet, like us. So our planet, the Earth, has an atmosphere. The air that you're breathing around you now is part of our atmosphere, and you can't really feel it. But if you move your hand fast enough through the air, you can feel the air moving around your hand. You can feel the wind you create, and you're pushing the air around your hand. So when this piece of rock flies through space, it hits our atmosphere like this. And it's like hitting something solid. So it slows down that piece of rock, but it doesn't just slow it down. It creates something called friction. So here's the experiment you can do. Friction is what happens when you rub two things together. So if you take your hands and rub them together like this, really fast, what happens? What do you feel? Okay, you can stop. Your hands get warm. You rub your hands together and it creates friction, which is when heat is generated from two things rubbing together like that. So your hands get quite warm. But when a piece of rock flies through space and hits the atmosphere, that creates friction too, but not just a bit of warmth. The temperature it makes is about 5,000 degrees, which is really hot. It's nearly the same temperature as the surface of the sun. So when a piece of rock hits our atmosphere, it quickly reaches that temperature, 5,000 degrees, and that's hot enough to vaporize rock and metal, to completely burn it away. So when you see a shooting star flying through the sky, it's a meteor burning as it passes through the atmosphere. So it's not really a star, it's a piece of rock burning away. And if it's only a small bit of rock, and most of these meteors they might be about the size of a basketball, they're not very big. You can get big ones, but most of them are very small. And if it's really small, it will completely burn away. There'll be nothing left of it before it gets through the atmosphere. But if it's a bit bigger, maybe it will survive its journey through the atmosphere and it will land on the surface of the Earth, and that's called a meteorite. And then you can go and see meteorites. They have them in science museums and space centres. Leicester Space Centre's got a meteorite you can go and touch. It's just a lump of iron with all these little holes in it from where it's been burning through the atmosphere. So that's what you're looking at when you see a shooting star. Right, my last question is, what is your favourite part of the job? Ooh, that's an easy one to answer. I love my job. Teaching children about space. I love space. I've been reading about it on and off my whole life, but in the last 5 years since I started doing this job, I've read about it a lot. My absolute favourite thing to read about is the Apollo space program. So when people first walked on the moon and the rockets they built to learn how to go to the moon, that's my favourite thing. But I like everything about space, planets and stars, and maybe thinking about, is there alien life out there? I love all of it. And space is a huge, incredible place, and we've not discovered a lot of it yet. We're still waiting to explore with new telescopes and rockets and things like that. But it just gets me very excited to think about all the things that could be out there that we haven't yet encountered. So children like space as well. And children, I think, are the people with the absolute best imaginations about what we could do in space and what we might find in space. So I like helping children to use their imaginations to think about these things and to help them see what's out there. Because sometimes, well, when I bring a show into a school, there's quite often a lot of children who don't know what I'm talking about, so it's great to be able to introduce them to space and planets and the stars and the moon. But what I love even more is when there's always a couple of children, there's always one or two in each class, and that child must have got a space book or watched a film or something, and they know a lot of the stuff I'm talking about already. They know about the planets, and they know about meteors and asteroids. They know the names of these astronauts. So Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon. The second man was Buzz Aldrin. My favourite astronaut is a man called Michael Collins. He was on that mission too, but he didn't walk on the moon. But he's still my favourite astronaut. So maybe you could go away and find out what Michael Collins did. Find out why he didn't walk on the moon. It's very cool, very interesting. So I love the reaction I get. What my favourite part of the job is that children seem to find such joy in coming into the dome. And my shows are only short. It's usually 30 minutes to an hour that they spend with me. But it's just so different from what you experience in the classroom that I love being able to show this to you. This is why I was so very sorry to not be able to come to your school on Wednesday, because I've got this coronavirus thing. I feel fine, but I can't come out of this room until until I get a negative test. It's not so bad. I can say I've got lots of books and I've got my guitars as well, so I've got stuff to keep me happy. But I was very sorry not to be able to come to your school, so that's why I asked you if you had any questions, and it's why I'm very happy to give you some of these answers. So hopefully this will keep you going until you can maybe book us to come back and you can really see just how wonderful it is to come into the planetarium and learn about space. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to my answers. None of them have been short. I'm not very good at doing short answers to questions. I'm very sorry for that, but I hope you've enjoyed it. So now I'm going to go away, turn this video off and go back and edit it and add lots of... So hopefully you've been watching it with pictures and graphics and things like that. Now I'm going to go and do that. So thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.